Okay, Eddie, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. I'm Eddie Rivas. I am a recording engineer and elementary school teacher here at Total Annihilation Studios, and I worked on your record that's coming out very soon. I think October?
Yeah,
Yeah,
October 20th.
Ghosts Among Us.
Ghosts Among Us, there we go. Yeah, I was wondering what
All
the name
Souls.
was. And then also worked with you guys and other bands, and the virtual volumes was done here as well.
How long have you been a recording engineer?
About, like, where I actually wanted to learn recording and really started applying myself was about 22 years, so right around 2000. My old band had a drummer that had gone to recording school, and I'd go and hang out with him at the studio and kind of pick his brain and watch and stuff like that, and I really liked it. Then when he quit, it was kind of by default left up to me to learn some basic recording for our demos and stuff like that. And I started buying gear.
And what was the first board that you actually worked with?
The first board was an Elisa Studio 32, which was designed for ADATs. And it was an inline board, very simple board. What I like about that board is the preamps were actually very clean, so there wasn't a lot in the way of the signal path. So it actually was a decent board. And just as an aside, I had worked with Fatso Jetson using that board, and the other board they worked on in conjunction at another studio later was a Neve. And I remember when the mix came out, you could not tell the difference between like my little, I don't know, $200 board and the Neve. Like, it's such a clear signal path and presentation that it didn't color the sound very much. So I actually like that board.
So these are all analog boards you're talking about?
Yeah.
When you started, was the mixdown process down from, say, like half inch to eighth inch, and then from there onto like an ADAT or some form like that?
Well, I went straight from, because I had sort of thought about when I made the investment to like start to get either a tape machine or a computer.
Yeah.
I thought about the records I grew up listening to were all done analog. So I bought a 1-inch 16 track. And then I did have a computer, like a spare computer, and I bought a sound card to be able to mix into that. Mm-hmm. But soon after I bought a 1/4-inch 2-track to mix down to. So for years, I want to say 8 years or so, my main setup was 1-inch 16 track into whatever console. I went through consoles pretty quickly. Like I went from that Alisas to a Soundtrax Topaz, great board also, to a TAC Scorpion, then a Soundcraft TS24, and then finally to the Neotech.
Wow. And then at what point did Pro Tools come into the equation?
Pro Tools took a while because I didn't like the fact I couldn't get all 24 tracks from the tape machine without spending a ton of money into Pro Tools. So eventually I did get a Motu 24IO interface and was using Digital Performer. But I had a producer approach me and say, if you get Pro Tools, I can bring you more projects and you'll pay it off right away.
The producer that did our album was Alain Johannes. He was in here working, and Alan says that this is probably the best drum room in all of Los Angeles.
Oh wow!
So,
really great of these.
for miking techniques for drums, is there a certain thing that you do to make it stand out, or do you think a lot of it has to do with the construction of the building, or just the room itself, or is there something specific you think makes this place such a standout with the drum sound?
I mean, I do think it's a good sounding room, but that was just sheer luck. I mean, the walls are parallel, which is supposed to be a disaster, but we just had to split the room in half for the studio that's next door to share. So there was no real planning in terms of we're gonna make the the shape of the room a certain thing other than the rectangle that it is. I think because there's other things down there, and there's the stairs in the way, and there's enough diffusion that it breaks up everything. But I think I just got lucky that it's a good sounding room. The main thing is, well, first of all, it's always like a good drummer on a good drum set. You know, that's the biggest factor with anything, right? With any, whether you're recording guitars or bass, or it's the musician and their gear.
Is there a certain type of miking technique that you use though in order to get, like, say, like distance-wise, that gives you like a bigger sound, or sometimes, like, say if you come like at a certain point it gets tighter or looser?
Well, with that room, what I tend to do, and especially, and this was consideration because I knew Alan was going to be producing and mixing it. So what I did is I used the gobos to surround the drums a little bit, so the immediate close mics have a drier sound. But then I put 2 sets of room mics out there. There's a set in front of the kit, maybe not too far, maybe 3 feet, which is a mid-side technique, and then there's another pair of stereo room mics on the floor. And all this stuff mainly I've learned through Albini's techniques. You know, he's one of my favorite engineers. I studied with him in France when he did a mix with the Masters program. I had already picked up on a lot of things he does, but it was nice to have the opportunity to pick his brain on specifics. Like, am I doing this right? What's another way to do this? The microphones I use, for example, on Tony's snare. His snare, I think, is a brass snare. So it's got a lot of attack and crack, and I used Altec 175, which is a small diaphragm condenser tube mic, I think from the 60s, that captures all that attack. So, you know, and also my own experiences, right, over the years. But a lot of the techniques, double miking his toms, that I learned from Albini, putting the room mics on the floor, the mid-side. So I kind of use a lot of his techniques because I find that, you know, he's done such a wide range of recordings that technique seems to fit, or that setup seems to fit all those styles very well. I wanted to give him options so when it came to mix, he could pick and choose, you know, a drier sound, a little more roomy sound, or a more extreme room presentation of the drums. Since I didn't know what he was gonna do, I wanted him to have the options available so that he could, you know, wouldn't have to then try and synthesize the sound of the room. You know, he could just, okay, well, I'm gonna use these room mics, or I'm gonna use those room mics, or none at all, whatever, you know, depending on the song and the mix he wanted. That was how I approached it. Same thing if I was looking at the tracks over here earlier, and if you notice, there's no plugins being used. I tried to really give him the rawest sounds to work with, because I didn't want to sort of, you know, have him, like if I were to use compression on some things, he can't undo that. It's like, you know, you can't
then you're
take
creating
away
like
spice
more
from the food.
of a blank slate.
Yeah, so I just wanted to give him the best sounds I could for him to then choose to do whatever he felt he needed to in order to process those sounds. I think the only things I compressed going in were the kick drum, just limiting it a little bit to take the peaks off the top so it doesn't, you know, go into digital distortion. And I think maybe Meg's bass was the only thing, and then I think maybe a touch on your vocals.
We did a very specific thing on this record, which I've never done before, and that's in that Alan took a Line 6 Helix and then A-B'd my rig. So basically, A'd my live rig, which was me playing live, and then he ran the B through the Helix, and then was basically manipulating the Helix as I played live. So has anybody ever done that sort of thing before? Where like one person is like, say, manipulating, like say the player's playing live, so it's one guy playing, but there's basically one person in charge of effectuating half of it, like say a couple tracks, and then the other person is playing live, like we did in our recording.
Not that I can think of. Not in real time. There's times where somebody will take tracks and then we'll, mess with them. That's why on your tracks there was always, and Meg's too, a DI, so that way Alan could feed it in back into whatever, the Helix or Pro Tools to manipulate it.
The other thing that Alan did that I thought was really interesting was, and I'd never had anybody do this before, was ran me live when I was doing my vocals through the mics that you were using in the live room, in the big room, and then had me going through. Was it an amplifier?
It was like a weird reverb.
It was like a reverb chamber thing, right?
Yeah, he was good about coming up with complementary parts when you guys had ideas.
Yeah, that was amazing. I've never worked with a musician who could literally, you suggest something to him and literally close his eyes and go, okay, yeah, roll it, and then just nail it,
execute it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that was all very impressive. You know?
As a child, every musician goes through this where they're trying to emulate somebody. It's like the process of emulation, and then eventually you sort of find your voice, and then you go with whatever you find. Engineer-wise, obviously you talked about Albini, but were there other engineers that you sort of still look at as far as the emulation and sort of are fan?
Yeah, I mean the people that I like, Rudy Van Gelder a lot. He did a lot of Impulse, Riverside recordings, and his was same thing, good microphone with amazing musicians, obviously. Who else? I like some Billy Anderson stuff, like the real heavy stuff he's done with the Melvins. I met him. He's been here a couple times. And then Joe Barisi, I like his recordings a lot. Corey Rusk, I like some of the stuff he's done. Butch Vig, I like the stuff he did with the Laughing Hyenas and Killdozer. So those are Tom Dowd, he did stuff for Atlantic, for Coltrane, Allman Brothers, Mingus. So those are the names that, Eddie Kramer, the stuff he did with Led Zeppelin and with Hendrix. I mean, those all, I think, have influenced what is my idea of what a good recording engineer is. Alex Newport, who we're friends with, and he also worked on our the band I was in. He recorded on our record, and I love the sound of his records too.
Yeah, Alex is great.
Yeah, just similar to with working with you guys and Alan. I was thinking about how he kind of trusted me with a lot of choices, and I think only twice did he make a recommendation outside of what I'd done. Like I remember on one guitar over there, he's like, "Oh, that's a little too bright. Is there a more tame microphone on the high end or whatever?" And most of the time, like I said, with the exception of maybe 2 times that I can remember, he really respected my experience and my awareness of the room, and which is, I was thinking about this, how he's worked with huge people, did that Chris Cornell record, PJ Harvey. So
Queens of the Stone Age.
Yeah, Queens of the Stone Age, his own bands. I mean, he could have been very easily micromanaged, but I'm glad we were able to have a dynamic where it's like he was thinking the ideas, I was thinking of the technical side, which I think is what makes that an effective and fruitful kind of situation. He didn't have to worry about the technical stuff. I handled those things. He chimed in just a couple times about because he was probably thinking, okay, final mix, that guitar's a little too bright. Let's tone it down a little bit. Things like that. So, and I was thinking, he came in and he was not an intimidating person at all. He was very easy to work with. Especially like I said, considering his resume and who he's worked with. Those types of moments are very validating. To have someone like him think that I'm a competent engineer, you know. So a similar thing happened when I went to study with Albini. He started asking me questions about things I recorded. He said, well, how'd you record that amp? How'd you record that guitar or whatever instrument, you know? And those moments are really validating and inspirational because they tell you, yeah, you're doing the right thing. I know my father's work ethic. He was a farm worker and labor, you know, bracero. I'm sure part of that. I've never had to work those kinds of jobs or that kind of hard physical labor. But in terms of understanding that, the way I look at it maybe as a Chicano or just as a human being, you know, is I want to contribute to whatever it is that I'm doing. So when I'm a teacher, right, I want to contribute to my community, my students, you know, even our country, right, the world. I hope that whatever I'm doing is adding to the quality of life of whether it's my students or my clients here in the studio. Because I think that ultimately what I realized some time ago is that the thing I like most about being in the studio is being here with people, you know, interacting with people, having them trust me with their art, right? These are things that when we're dead and gone, they're still going to be around. They're proof, right? Evidence of our existence. And so I don't take it lightly that our lives can have impact. Yeah, well, the studio is in Lincoln Heights, which is just near downtown. There's a website, totalanihilationstudios.com or eddierivas.com. Same thing with social media, Total Annihilation Studios on Instagram and Facebook.
In Los Angeles.
Yeah, Los Angeles, and my email's tastudio55, the number's 55 at AOL.com. So I'm still holding on to AOL.